Okay. All right. We are live. Okay. So welcome everyone to this reading with Ann Wadsworth and Randi Triant. We're super happy to have you with us tonight. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the space you find yourselves in right now. The Bureau, the short explanation for a long name is that we are a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And the service we provide is just holding this space for queer culture. A lot of books, as you can see, but we also have changing art exhibitions in here and do tons of events, book related and otherwise, anything under the queer cultural umbrella. We started this project in 2012, but we've been here at the center since 2014. And we're an all volunteer organization. So we are dependent on sales, donations, and all the support we can get. So we appreciate your coming out tonight. We do have a suggested donation of $10. I know some of you have already given, but there's change in here. And I'll say also, if money is tight and you want to buy some books, you should definitely hold on to your money to buy some books. I'll pass this around. Front row already gave. Thanks so much. And for those of you who are online, you can always go to our website to make a donation, bgsqb.com, or Venmo at bgsqb. And before I get started introducing our readers tonight, I just wanted to read a brief land acknowledgement. The Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We are actively seeking to partner with and provide material support to a local queer Indigenous organization. And we hope to make an announcement about this partnership in the near future. But in the meantime, we encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House's Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-Native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. You can learn more about that at mannahattafund.org. Again, that's the American Indian Community House here in New York City. So, yes, our beloved Canadian friends have been doing this for years. And every time we host Canadians, I'm like, we need to get on that. We've got time, a few hundred years, it's time. So we're doing it. And yeah, we are in talks with a queer Indigenous group that is looking to start a farm here in New York State. So hopefully we'll have some news on that soon. That's right. Yes. So Ann Wadsworth is going to be reading first. She is the author of 2 novels, Libretto and Light Coming Back. Light Coming Back was shortlisted for the Farrow Grumley Prize, the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction, and the Stephen Crane First Fiction Award. German and French translations are available with the title Mrs. Medina. Her short stories have appeared in several publications, including Christopher Street and Blythe House Quarterly. She has been a MacDowell Colony Fellow and the recipient of a Wellspring Grant from the Boston Athenaeum. She lives in Boston. Please welcome Ann Wadsworth.
Thanks, Greg. Before I start, I wanted to thank Greg and Donnie for making the space available this evening. It's a great pleasure to be here. Great pleasure to get out of Boston for a while. The theme for this evening is complicated friendships. I couldn't be happier with this. It fascinates me, and a lot of my writing has to do with complicated friendships of one sort or another. And in plots of character-driven novels, complications tend to serve as a dynamic that moves the story forward. This is just from a technical point of view, but they also provide the most excitement. In libretto, which I've set in the lush central environs of central Italy, an unlikely trio of a gay man and two lesbians who are trying desperately to start a relationship confront their personal devils in the ancient hill town of Perugia. Their mutual love of music draws them together and pulls them into a network of melodramatic intrigue where the borderlines between passion and friendship tend to overlap, which of course is one complication. And Death has his own arias to sing, sadly. I'm going to read an excerpt from a brief scene in which the two female characters, Allie and Elaine, who have begun an affair, are struggling with the realization that their composer friend, Vincent, gay man, with whom they each have a very complicated friendship, is nearing the end of his life. The novel is written in the first person, which I will never, ever do again. And it's almost entirely this section is almost entirely in dialogue and is seen through the eyes of Allie, one of the women who is a journalist. So we just leap right into the middle of things. They argue a lot. Allie speaks. This place, this rest home, how long would Vincent have to stay there? Would it be week to week, month to month, or what, forever? Can we stop referring to it as a care facility, by the way? I have visions of rows of wheelchairs lined up against the walls, people waiting for trays of inedible food. I don't see Vincent there at all. Don't let your imagination run away with you, Allie. This is not our decision to make. Well, treatment for HIV complicated by TB is long-term, very long-term. He's told me that, and there's no guarantee of anything. He needs serious treatment someplace. Is there light at the end of this tunnel? I don't know. I only get my information from his condition, from him, what he tells me and what I observe. If he's coughing up blood again, he's hiding it now. I do know that he takes his drugs, especially his new ones. I make sure of that in the morning and in the evening, but the midday dose, who knows? I'm not there. He's having trouble sleeping now, except at regular times of the day, like right at the moment. I'm not there. Sometimes when he's in the shower, I grab his sheets to do a quick wash, and they're soaked in sweat. I know that's wrong. So don't ask me about lights in the tunnel, please. He needs to be in a place where someone else can care for him better than I'm doing right now. Being a guest in my apartment is not helping. And now maybe I have to worry about you too. Whatever for? Well, for one thing, why did Vincent's doctor think she should test you for HIV? Is there something I should know? We are sleeping together, sweetie. The test was Vincent's idea, Elaine, and she tested me for TB as well. She only gave me the TB test. Well, if you're concerned, talk to her about it. Allie, how intimate were you and Vincent before this recent relapse of his, physically, I mean? And don't be coy and pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about, and I'm not very good at being coy. If you mean, are we sexually involved now? The obvious answer is no. Last fall, if the circumstances had been different, the situation might have gone another way. But emotionally, yes, we've become closer. It happens, Elaine. I know it happens. It's happened to me. It's called flirting. Well, it's nothing at all like flirting. Vincent and I are friends, and I don't flirt with friends. I've always had a feeling that something happened between you two during the night you had to walk back to Perugia from Cortina. It's a long walk. You mean the night we ended up in the hay truck? Something almost did. Well, why don't you tell me what happened? The night was cold. We were trying to keep warm. Do I need to explain? But at that point, I don't think he was sure about how sick he really was, or with what, in addition to his HIV. So he was reluctant, I guess, to go too far. I was disappointed, frankly, because at that particular moment, well, strange to say, I wanted something to happen physically. And it surprised me, surprised both of us. I don't know why it happened, curiosity. But in the end, I fell asleep, if that helps you out. This was before you and I started up, Elaine. Remember that. But did you continue to think about it? You mean, did I want to try it again? No. It was a momentary physical thing, I guess, for both of us. And the moment passed, but we know each other differently now. We're easier being physically close. We're perfectly aware of our own sexual preferences. We aren't trying to fool each other, but there are different kinds of intimacy and different ways to experience it. Sex is the easiest way, or so I always believe, but that's not the road we took. But there's something exclusive between you now. Maybe, but I could say the same thing about the two of you. You and Vincent have a particular closeness that I don't share. You have a history, I know that. We're not getting touchy about Vincent, are we? Because that would be ridiculous. Of course it would. But it's more complicated than it seems. I'm sorry if I pushed you. I don't want to argue with you or Vincent or anyone right now. I'm very glad to hear it. We sat quietly for a while, finishing our wine. At one point, I looked over and wondered whether my feelings for her might be changing gears. So, where do we go from here? She asked me after a while. You and me. You mean, what are my intentions? I smiled. Why must you always joke? All right, think of our circumstances. I've got the Upper World article to take care of. You've still got complications at the theater, so you'll be here in Perugia for a while, and I'll be here too for at least a bit. So maybe we could, I don't know, date, I guess. Date? You mean like dinner and a movie? Sweetheart, you're going backwards. We're way past dinner and a movie. I touched her hand. I know we are, I said. She turned her head toward the hall. Meanwhile, we now have a mutual project, and I think he just flushed the toilet. After a while, Vincent wandered in and asked for some gelato. Elaine went into the kitchen. You need a haircut, Bud, I said to him. You're starting to look a little bushy. He ran his hand through his hair. Would they have a barber at this place she wants me to go to, whatever it is? What do you think? If they don't, I'm sure they can arrange for one. And maybe a piano? That seems likely. Elaine returned with a small bowl of stracciatella. This is the last of it, Vincent. He took the bowl from her and went off to his bedroom. After he was gone, she said, it's a little late for you to go back up the hill. Stay here tonight, why don't you? The wind had picked up, and I thought of her warm bed, the cold winter night, the comfort of her body. All right, it's not too late, but it's cold and I'm really tired. I'm tired of talking. In bed under the quilts, we wrapped ourselves around each other and rested. The wind was wailing dramatically against the shutters. This is a nice way to spend a winter night, she said. My head was just beneath her shoulder. I was already half asleep. Then we heard Vincent begin to cough. Elaine sat up quickly, and I rose on one elbow. Should you go into him? I asked her. He doesn't want that. I'll just wait for a few moments. But the moments extended themselves. His cough came from deep within his chest, and he struggled and struggled with it for quite a long time. Thank you.
Randi Triant is the author of 3 LGBTQ novels, What We Give, What We Take, A New Life, and The Treehouse. Her short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in the Gay and Lesbian Review, Art and Understanding, Christopher Street, and 2 anthologies of writing about HIV/AIDS, Art and Understanding, Literature from the First 20 Years of A and U, and Fingernails Across the Chalkboard, Poetry and Prose on HIV/AIDS from the Black Diaspora. She has taught writing at Boston College and at Emerson College. Please, Randi, come on up.
Thanks, Donnie, for that rousing introduction. And thank you, Greg and the Bureau, for hosting this event. And for Anne and for all of you showing up tonight. I'm going to be reading from What We Give, What We Take, and I'll be reading a few short excerpts from different sections of the novel, and hopefully they'll mesh for you to give you a little bit of a flavor of the novel. I should say that these excerpts appeared in Art and Understanding, which is a wonderful magazine about art and literature and HIV/AIDS, which I was very honored to be in. I was 15 years old when my mother left me for Vietnam. I want to believe she did it for me. Trey was good at lying, though, and she didn't lose any sleep over it, unlike me. I lost my ability to lay my head down, close my eyes, and drift off to dreamland bliss. I lost my name too, not right away. That would come later. What I wouldn't give to have my real name again, to start over at 40, living a life where people know you, a life in which you can sleep a solid 8 hours per night, but I can't. I continue to go by Pete Smith, the name I took out of precaution and self-preservation. They're not qualities to brag about. They're both born out of fear, but they keep me out of trouble in Provincetown, Massachusetts, where the residents, the artists, the drug addicts, the drag queens, have one philosophy in common. To hell with the past, all you have is the present, deal with it. Provincetown is as far east as you can get without falling into the ocean, because the cape is shaped like an arm curled around. What you would ordinarily think was the west end of Provincetown is actually the east end, and vice versa. Without your ordinary compass, a sense of vertigo prevails. A man with a false name and dark circles under his eyes can easily disappear into a place like that. Nothing is as it seems. When my trailer burned down last year due to faulty electrical wiring, I moved in with Spin. It was the first time I'd lived in a home that didn't have wheels or cement blocks underneath it. In his house is a small purple cape off of Commercial Street, the main drag in Provincetown. Out back in a garage, Spin's got a lab, the Still, that would rival any biotech firm. It's always best to put yourself front and center to avoid attention, I think, and Spin agrees. Small town cops normally don't think the drug trade lives in a garage painted fuchsia and surrounded by iris beds. Spin's wiry from his head to his thin feet. He's usually dressed in a t-shirt, light cutoffs, and some Converse high tops, one purple, one yellow. It's not my style, which is khakis and a pressed shirt, evidence that I came from an imaginary good home. People who live here think we're lovers, but we're not. We're not even friends. I stick to picking up women in town, only for a short stay. As much as I try to get involved, I'm worried about Spin. He's HIV positive, and while he's always been compact, now he's shading into the land of the skinny. Have you been dipping into the Still? I asked him. We're eating breakfast in the backyard, currant scones that he baked. The man is a constant source of surprise. He stops mid-chew, the scone filling out his cheek like a chipmunk with a nut. No, he says. You okay? I press on, although an old voice inside my head from my childhood is saying, back away. He swallows. His Adam's apple seems like a big border to me now. I'm all right, he says confidently, but then looks away too quickly. There's a part of me that wants to ask him again about how he's feeling, to force him to tell me the truth. But that other voice is back, the one that keeps me alone and safe. Don't say a word, I tell myself. Spin's having a hard enough time as it is. He doesn't need me telling him how sick he's starting to look, to point out to him how he's never going to be accepted by the men he pursues. Dark-haired, strong, jawline boys, his bodies ripple as they strut through town. He doesn't have the mandatory G.I. Joe good looks. His hair is all wrong. No matter how he grooms it, it's the inside of an electrical box. Gathering our crumb-filled plates and dirty coffee cups together, he walks toward the house. Say something, I think. I don't. The truth is, I have the same genetic flaw as my mother. We're experts at excusing ourselves as soon as anyone demands some sort of involvement. During the hot summer days in Provincetown, the scorching sun at the beach gets on everyone's nerves. Some days at 3, when my shift at the post office ends, Spin takes a break from the still, stopping at the PO on his way to the beach. Want to come, he asks. I tell him no, and that's that. I avoid going to the beach. It's not that I don't love the ocean or the sight of a pretty woman in a bikini the width of dental floss. I got polio as a kid, and sand is not exactly a steady surface for a 40-year-old man with 2 crutches. So when he comes by this afternoon and asks me, I'm still feeling bad about this morning. So I say yes. It takes us an hour to walk what everyone else does in minutes. We've drawn so many stairs that we were as if we were buck naked. My white shirt is unbuttoned. I'm drenched in sweat. With my khakis, I'm wearing my heavy Oxfords, not exactly beach attire. He's driven, one of the gay boys says about me as we pass by. Spin snaps out our blanket into dead air. He smooths it over the hot sand. He practically hops up and down. He's so happy. His thin chest looks even scrawnier against the expanse of sea and sky. He has the physique of a boy who builds sandcastles. He's wearing a backpack, adding to the schoolboy illusion. Throwing my sticks down, I find a spot on the blanket and sit. Aren't you hot with that shirt? He asks as he unshoulders his pack. I know what he wants. He wants me to lift the curtain to wow the audience. My small, rippled waist leading up to broad shoulders, the muscular arms. This is his bait for the sharks circling around us. He lies on his stomach facing me, eyes closed, his toes tapping the blanket. Immediately, I notice it. A purple lesion, dime size on the back of his thigh. It should be hidden by his shorts, but he's cut this pair up too high. I look away and watch 2 men in the water. They're grimacing as the water inches up their legs. It's no good. I'm drawn back to that lesion. Maybe I hadn't seen it correctly. The afternoon sun can transform the beautiful into the ugly. In a dark club, a sunburn looks healthy. On the beach, it's painful to look at. Maybe it's not a lesion. Maybe it's a spider bite. A mysterious grape stain. It's a lesion. The more I stare at it, the more it seems to throb. Should I tell him? That second voice in my mind kicks in though. Not your problem. Take off your shirt, Spin murmurs. Everyone's staring at us. This is, of course, exactly what he wants. Roll over, will you? I tell him. I can't talk to you that way. He opens one eyelid. Roll over, I say. Still, Spin doesn't move, so I take my shirt off, and then he flips over. Minutes later, he starts to turn his body again, but I stop him with my hand on his shoulder. I've never touched him before. I've gone out of my way to avoid it. Touching someone is open to interpretation. But I don't care what message I'm sending as I grab his shoulder, other than don't move. He stares at my fingers on his bicep. Don't, I say quietly. Don't what? He smiles. There's a lesion on your leg. What? His smile falters. He tries to lift his head, but I'm still holding him down. On the back of your leg. Shit. He closes his eyes. What am I going to do? I think he means now, but when his eyes open, they're wet. How long, I ask him. He doesn't answer me. He doesn't have to. Somewhere in me, I know. Nearby, sunbathers are pulling their stuff together. Umbrellas are folded, sand chairs gathered. It's time for tea dance, where they'll show off their glistening bodies, dancing with wild abandon. Proud of how full of life their bodies are, how good their lives are, how much they're loved. I place my shirt on Spin's chest. Here, put this around your waist. He massages the collar before he sits up, ties the shirt around his waist. Pete, I've wanted to tell you, there's a trailer for rent. I interrupt him. Whatever it is he wants to tell me, it can't be good. I'm looking at it at 6 tonight. I really appreciate you letting me stay temporarily with you. It's a lie, of course. I hate myself for saying it. But how can I take care of him? I don't know the first thing about taking care of anyone other than myself. Well, that's great, Spin says, forcing a smile. I want to slap him hard to make him angry, for him to grab one of my sticks and smack the living daylights out of me. It would be easier for me then. But Spin isn't angry, or at least he's not showing he is. He knows I'm leaving when he needs me most. And still, he says in the gentlest voice, we should get going then. You don't want to miss your appointment. He stands and then starts to pull the blanket out from underneath me. Thank you. Oh, so Ed and I can have a little conversation about complex friendships, which I'm sure none of you have ever had. And also about our 2 novels. So if you want to come up.
Sure, I need to stand.
Oh, well, I kind of need it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So you talked about, you gave us an excerpt that showed a little bit about the different complexities between these 3 central characters, the 2 women and the man. And I'm wondering if, if you could speak to that a little bit about how they are different. Their complications, both, some of them have physical complications and some have emotional, or both.
Funny that we're both writing about HIV.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that's way in the past, but it's really not. I think there are several complications involved here. I really love that theme of complicated friendships because it covers a lot of ground. And the 2 women are trying to get their relationship off the ground. Meanwhile, one of the women and the gay man who's there have had a little, they've had a little confrontation. They were walking back from a party in Italy and they got stuck on the road and got into the back of a hay truck. And we all know what happens in the backs of hay trucks. So they're a little confused about sexuality members. So that to me is a different and complicated thing. Meanwhile, the other woman eventually becomes the caregiver for Vincent, who's gay, and in the last days of his life. And this causes uneasiness among the others. So, in other words, you have three different complications sort of involved. But in the end, they have to decide what they have to choose between what would be best for themselves and what would be the best of people for the people they've come to love. And to me, that's the biggest complication of all.
Yeah.
It covers everything. And I know when you got into the difference between Spin and Dickie.
Or Pete.
Oh, no, I my brain goes. But that is when everything picked up for me in this excerpt,
Mhm.
because you see very complicated, especially on the beach scene. And seeing the purple lesion is, it's funny that it's odd that you don't find these types of discoveries so horrifying as we used to. My book is set in the 90s, so or the mid 90s, when that sort of discovery, it was death. And I don't really know, I'm not really clear when.
So mine goes from the 1960s during the Vietnam War. Mine is told in 3 parts. The first part is when Dickie is 15. Dickie Pete Smith, he adopts the name Pete Smith when he goes on the run. He's 15 and his mother leaves for Vietnam. So that's the first part. And then the second part is told through the eyes of his mother when she lands in Vietnam during the war. The third part is Dickie when he's 40, which is some of the pieces that I read tonight, when he's already living with Spin because his trailer has burned down. And for me, it was more, so complications, as you talked about in the very beginning, I mean, they provide that tension. Complications are the engine that drives fiction for me. And so without complications, I just feel like fiction is going to be very flat. That's the type of writer I am. But for them, what was interesting to me was that here was Spin, who's a gay man, and he is dying of AIDS, and he's so joyous. I mean, he was one of my favorite characters ever to write. He's so joyous and so welcoming to Dickie, who has been completely shut down. He's a straight man who's been on the run for 25 years, on the run on a number of different levels. And he was taught at a very early age from his mother to not become involved with anybody, to keep everybody at a distance, not get involved. And here's Spin is welcoming him into the house. And so that the friction starts, you start wondering if Spin's going to, kind of control the situation, or is Dickie going to actually leave him like that excerpt says? So you have to read the book in order to find that out. So for me, it was more about the two of them. And then the other thing that was really important to me was, and this happened because I was reading Sarah Schulman's book, and part of her most recent book talked about how in mainstream media, they like the film Philadelphia, they depict these straight men who come in and save the day for that man who's dying of AIDS or who has HIV. And I kind of wanted to flip that on its head, because my experience has been that there have been a lot of gay men, HIV positive and otherwise, who've actually helped straight men. And so it was very important to me to show that Spin was actually the angel in this case, not Dickie, even though he's my main protagonist in the whole book. So
We've answered all my questions.
well, I hope not. I hope not.
No. I was going to ask you about your other novels, but if you have something for me.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you because part of Anne's book is largely set also in the opera community. That's the whole subtext of it. And opera's an acquired taste. That's what my mother used to tell me, and she had season tickets to the Met. And I never acquired that taste. I'm here to admit it. And so I just wondered, I loved it, even though, I had never, I I was dragged to the Met.
Lucky
But
you.
I loved it, and I just wondered why you made that conscious decision to kind of embed it in the opera world, which was fascinating.
Actually, it wasn't a decision. It's something that's been nagging at me for years and years. And I've been given advice, don't ever include anything operatic or any reference, you know, you can talk about jazz, you can talk about rock, you can talk about anything you want, but stay away from opera because no one will be interested. So, your proof of that.
I'm signing up for season tickets as soon as I leave here.
But opera is something that includes all the different forms of the human senses, plus the art forms, such as what you see when you go into the opera house and the lights go down and it gets dark. You have music, you have for the ears, you see and what's on the stage, you have painting, you have ballet, you have everything all thrown into the pot.
Mhm.
And somehow you manage to ignore the ridiculous plots and the things that don't work, disasters on the stage, which we all wait for, and to see what's going to happen to change the way the opera's going. But I included it because we have Elaine, one of the major characters, who is an opera stage director, and Allie, who writes operatic criticism, and Vincent, who is dying and trying to complete his own opera. So that seemed natural. And I tried to make it as palatable as possible, but strangely enough, it sort of sunk down and became a minor sort of theme that just sort of bobbed there. And other things rose to the surface to be more important. So people needn't be afraid to buy that book.
You will actually love opera by the time you do it.
It includes 4 discs. Didn't tell
No, I didn't tell them that. So does anybody have questions? We'll take a little break from us for a minute. Yes.
Question. You talk about friction between Sven and Dickie. Does Sven have expectations inviting him into the, I mean, you didn't talk about expectation,
Mhm.
but there's friction. So if there's friction, it's disappointment and expectation. But you didn't reveal that.
Right.
So
Because I want you to read the book. No, I'm being coy. But yes, there's always expectations. You're completely right. And it's what spin does with them that hopefully will grab your heart by the end of the book. And also how Dickie responds to it. And what happens with that. I'm leading you along. Yeah, Linda.
Randy, I am really curious about what happened, what went on with Dickie between part 1 and part 3. What influence, what happened with him? He was a teenager and then he's 40.
Well, in part 3, it begins with spin, but it goes back and forth with a lot of flashbacks.
Yes.
Because he runs away. I don't want to give away the book, but he runs away to a place that you all know about right now in this place, this city. He runs away to New York City, and he is a runaway, and he is helped, I should say, by an older photographer artist and taken in by him. And so Dickie is 15 until the time he's 18. He's in New York. And then he leaves. I won't tell you why he has to leave New York, but he leaves New York and then he ends up in Provincetown where he stays until bitter end.
There's a gap. There's a big gap.
I'm not telling you anything more. Put me in a torture chamber.
That's another book.
Now, my next book is, I've already started doing a little bit of research, and it's quite different. Right now, I'm
The
reading.
next ones always are.
Right now, I'm reading a lot about Nordic shamanism of all things, which is kind of a bizarre way to go. And for some reason, I think I can weave that into a fiction book that somebody will buy. Yes, David.
I have a question slash comment about the, first off, it's so nice to watch the two of you interact. I don't know if you know each other from before. You said, are you both from Boston?
Yes,
Well,
we do know.
Her
each
wife cuts my hair. That was our first
other.
contact.
That was our first
You
contact.
do have a nice way of interacting in front of us, and there are a lot of coincidences between the two books, right? And it sounds like, if I did my math right, that Tiki's third part is in the 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So Anne is your name, right?
Yes.
And I made a comment that AIDS isn't really over, and I just kind of making a comment, and
Are you saying you think that AIDS is not really over?
no,
No,
it's
I
not
know.
that. And I find it interesting that I'm a gay man who's the same age as you ladies, pretty much, and or lived through that time also, and
You're much younger.
I I won't say like I feel like AIDS is over, but I do feel like in some ways AIDS is over.
It's like COVID is over.
And yeah, you're right. I think COVID's over too.
No,
I'm not trying to kind of like be controversial at all, just like throwing out like maybe my stupid ideas, right? So I'm just fascinating that the two of you are writing about the 90s. and
It's
AIDS.
absolutely coincidental, really, I
Oh,
think.
we didn't even know.
No,
each
I
other.
mean, that's what draws you to the 90s.
Well, for me, first of all, you know, you and I have known each other, what, 40 years now? So I'm gonna disagree with you vehemently in that I don't think AIDS is over. In 2019, there was 1.1 million people over the age of 13 who were HIV positive in this country alone. And that number has only grown. And yes, there is the cocktail. We know that there's the drug regimen. But there's still depression around it. There's still people who are dying from it. And I firmly believe it's still a public health issue. It might also be because, as you know, I lost my best friend to AIDS back in the early 90s, it was right before the cocktail came out. And I lost several friends, as most people that I know have lost several friends. So I'm a firm believer that it's still a major public health issue for this country. And I made a decision back when I lost Bruce that I would definitely continue to have characters who were HIV positive until it was done away with completely. And so a lot of my writing is in, as I said before, that magazine that is ANU, Art and Understanding, which is all about HIV and AIDS and art and literature. And I just firmly believe it's not gone away yet. And until it does, especially when kids who are 13 are getting it mass, it's.
If I could just clarify my comment, I know AIDS and COVID. I don't need to say I don't, but I act like they do. And I'm wondering if, especially lesbian women, and I thank you, like you're writing about this stuff and you have been caretakers to gay men. And if I represent more than one gay man here, we've moved on in a lot of ways,
In some
you
ways,
haven't, and I appreciate it.
it's not that we haven't moved on, because as Randy alluded to,
Or you
and
haven't
it happens further on in my book, that Vincent, the character who is dying with AIDS complicated by TB, it may be temporarily under control, but what he's living with are the effects of that disease on him and on the people who know him. And I think that's a lot of what happens. You may be able to live with a cocktail or live some sort of life, but the effects of having this disease on you and the people you know if you're sick can be just as debilitating, I think. It may not kill you, but it just fucks up your life really terribly.
I thought it was interesting, I'm sorry, I thought it was interesting also that Vincent never really confides in
He
the
doesn't
in the
tell.
two women about it, and that you also, it's not just that he is HIV positive, but also that he has TB.
That's
So
right.
it's the combination of the two, and that he doesn't confide in these two people who are supposedly close to him.
And I think the reason for that I didn't get around to talking about was that he doesn't want to be defined by what he is.
True.
And he considers himself, he has this project that he wants to finish. He wants to finish his music before he dies. He somehow knows he's going to die, but he doesn't want other people to define him by that. So he works and works and works as long as he can. And because he defines himself as a composer, he does not define himself as a man with AIDS. And I think this is why he just doesn't talk to people about his sickness until he can no longer deny it. And Elaine, the other lesbian, cares for him, comes to care for him, takes him into her home and that evolves from that other complications with her lover, Allie. So, it's contagious, even with lesbians. I mean, in Boston, we had a group of lesbians who cared for gay men. This was not recently, but in the 90s or late 90s. But it does affect people other than yourself. And it adds complications to Elaine and Allie's relationship and to his relationship with everybody else. Finally, he's too sick to deny it. And that's when everything becomes more human. And, I can't think of any other word to say. It's more compassionate.
Not only complications, but dimension.
Yeah,
It has dimension.
yeah.
The other thing I would say, David, is just, I didn't start this book because of the 90s or the late 80s, 90s. I actually started the book because I wanted to write about the Vietnam War. And the book starts in the late 60s with that, when his mother leaves to supposedly entertain. She's a water tank escape artist, and she supposedly goes to entertain the troops. And so it really was about that drove me to write the book. And then, but I wanted to follow Dickie after he becomes a runaway. And so it ended up being in the early 90s. So what was happening in the early 90s, for especially in P-Town. P-Town was decimated. So that's where it came from for me, more than I'm stuck in the 90s. Maybe I'm stuck in the 60s, which is even more. Another question.
Yeah.
Just to comment, another question. You said that this disease doesn't just affect the person with the disease, of course, but it affects the family members of people around them. But isn't that true with any disease, with cancer, with any kind of disease? I mean, people, family members that have cancer, the whole family.
That's true, but
it's not specific to HIV.
No, not affecting, yes, diseases like cancer and all the other terrible diseases, they do affect family and friends. AIDS is very different. I mean, if you come down, for example, if you have cancer as a young person, your family is not going to kick you out of the house and alienate you forever. They will care for you. It's the attitude toward AIDS and people with AIDS, which is not the same as it used to be, I don't think.
No,
I didn't think of that.
Cause some,
Yeah,
cause you know, some people have a lot of attitude, especially in the black community. You know, once people tell you that you're HIV positive, the doctor tells you that, once you try to tell them, the reason why people shun and denial of their status or whatsoever is a rejection, like you said, the attitudes towards, because it's like, oh, it's quote unquote gay disease. Because first of all, okay, back then it was like the 80s, you know, they talk about oh the gay disease. But you know what? That's false. That's pure bullshit. Because at the end of the day, people that live with HIV, they live their full lives taking care of themselves and said, well, no matter if you're gay or hetero or bi or any sexual orientation or identity, we as human beings, no matter of our statuses. And the only thing to stop this is we have to take care of ourselves. We have to be honest, no matter if we rejected from our families and friends or whatsoever. If people are not there for you, they're not there for you.
you think this is true now?
Just like now, and AIDS is not over, like you said. AIDS is not over. Just like COVID is not over. So what we need to do is just be true to your status, take care of your bodies, and that's it. And if people have a problem with people that are positive, you know what that means. That means they are more dangerous to us than they are more dangerous to them. If you don't want nobody to be touching you or share blankets with you, then you need to get yourself out of my face. That's what I would say to them.
Yes, but if you don't think of a person who doesn't want anybody to touch them, or I mean, think of what that does to his or her life.
Yeah,
Now,
right.
and it affects that person in a very different way than saying, well, if you don't die of AIDS, then you're all clear.
Yeah, some people do die of that. That's true.
Exactly.
That's what we make quilts.
Yeah.
For people that died HIV positive and died of AIDS. People make quilts in San Francisco or anything in different cities, because you know, it's just like today.
Yeah.
And people need to take care of our body. And it does affect people's lives. It does affect people that are dying. And some people do, like some people are not honest with that. It's because the rejection, they get kicked out of their homes, people being homeless because
That's what they're trying to do.
right.
That issue.
was there another question? From anybody? I think we're
Yes.
close to the time, so
Yeah.
thank you again.
Thank you.
And the book's sold here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.